welcome to GW News Recap. I'm your anchor, Azan Jamir, bringing to you the top stories of the week. Let's have a look at the top stories that matter to the headlines. In a major development regarding the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, the GBR and NSC and Nkitovi Jumomi group has taken over the Kihoi camp in Newland. One person was killed and several others injured as fresh clashes erupted between the Hmar and Zomi tribes on the outskirts of Churachandpur in strife-torn Manipur on 18th March. Astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore returned home after the 8-day mission to the International Space Station that turned into a 9-month-long stay. Now let's have a look at the news in details. In a major development regarding the National Socialist Council of Nagaland NSCNU faction in Nagaland, the GBR and NSC and Nkitovi Jumomi group has reportedly taken over the Kihoi camp in Newland. Previously, this camp was occupied by the NSCNU faction led by Atokilonsa, Alezoveno and Commander-in-Chief Samson Aime. Reliable sources have said that top leaders Alezoveno and Samson Aime left the camp. Meanwhile, the military wing of the NSCNU faction has clarified that it was a military takeover to show unity despite differences among the civil wings. Speaking to the media, Colonel Joseph Almi of the Naga army stated that it was a military coup as the army was not satisfied with the leadership. He also stated that the Naga army from both groups came together on March 21st evening as they did not want disunity among themselves, having worked together for so long. The cabinet will decide the next step and choose the next leader, he further said, adding, whatever the impeachment of problems are going on, the Naga army has nothing to do with it. At this point, it remains unclear who will ascend to the new leadership. Reports suggest that it may take 2 to 3 working days to gain more insight as well as to cool the temperature. There have been reports of tensions brewing in the camp for the past few months. The camp is currently under strict surveillance. It is worth noting that Nkitovi Jumomi was impeached by the NSCNU in April 2024 for allegedly violating the group's constitution. Since then, Atokilonsa, Alezoveno and Commander-in-Chief Samson Aime have been occupying the camp. Importantly, Nkitovi Jumomi also serves as the convener of the Working Committee of the NNPGs, a coalition of Naga political groups engaged in negotiations with the Indian government. A 5-member delegation of Supreme Court judges led by Justice B.R. Kawai arrived in Manipur, Imphal, on March 22 to assess the situation and oversee relief efforts in the violence-affected state. The delegation includes Justice Surya Kant, Vikram Nath, M.M. Sundaresh, K.V. Vishwanath and N. Koteshwar. During their visit, Justice Kawai, who also serves as the executive chairman of the National Legal Services Authority, virtually inaugurated legal and medical camps across all districts of Manipur. The delegation will also launch new legal aid clinics in Imphal East, Imphal West and Ukhrul districts. Additionally, essential relief materials will be distributed to internally displaced persons, and legal services camps will connect IDPs with government welfare programs, ensuring access to healthcare, pensions and identity document reconstruction. The visit follows concerns raised by Congress MP Jairam Ramesh, who welcomed the decision but criticized the delay in imposing President's rule in the state despite the Supreme Court's earlier observation about the breakdown of constitutional machinery in August 2023. The violence between the Meitei and Kuki communities, which began on May 3, 2023, led to widespread unrest and prompted the central government to deploy paramilitary forces to restore order. One person was killed and several others injured as fresh clashes erupted between the Hmar and Zomi tribes on the outskirts of Churachandpur in strife-torn Manipur on 18th March. The deceased was identified as Lalrupui Pakhumate, 53 years. The violence broke out when Hmar groups opposed a Zomi faction hoisting their community flag. Soon, mobs of men armed with batons engaged in stone pelting, prompting security personnel to fire tear gas shells and several rounds in the air to disperse the crowds, officials said. Curfew was imposed in Churachandpur following the attack on Mar Inpui General Secretary Richard Mar in Zehang, which triggered tensions between the two communities. The situation escalated on March 18, hours after the Mar Inpui and Zomi Council reached a peace agreement to lift a shutdown. In response to the renewed clashes, the Zomi Students Federation announced an indefinite emergency shutdown from March 19, citing the volatile situation in the region. 6 Kukizo MLAs also appealed to people from the community to uphold peace and harmony and solve any issues without giving it a communal color. Whereas other organizations, including Mar Inpui and Zomi Council, pledged to work towards non-violence, communal harmony and peaceful coexistence. They condemned all forms of violence, including hate speech, destruction of properties and acts. Security forces conducted flag marches and fired tear gas and warning shots to disperse baton welding mobs engaged in stone pelting. Authorities reported shots fired by some individuals in the crowd but were unclear on who was responsible. Several properties were vandalized. Manipur has been gripped by ethnic violence between Meiteis and Kukizo groups since May 2023, resulting in over 250 deaths and leaving thousands displaced. The centre had imposed president's rule in the state on February 13 after N. Biren Singh resigned as the chief minister. The state assembly, which has tenure till 2027, has been put under suspended animation. At least 30 cadres of the banned CPI Maoists were killed in 2 separate encounters in Basta Division, South Chhattisgarh on March 20 as security forces intensified operations against left-wing insurgency. According to Basta Police, a joint team of security forces launched an anti-Maoist operation based on specific intelligence inputs. An encounter broke out in the dense forest along the inter-district border of Bijapur and Dantewada, where at least 26 Naxalites were neutralized. During the exchange of fire, a district reserve guard Jawan from Bijapur lost his life. The operation comes over a month after an encounter in Bijapur's Intravadi National Park area where 31 Naxalites and 2 security personnel were killed. Several weapons and explosives were also seized from the encounter site. Union Home Minister Amit Shah reacted to the operation, stating that the security forces had achieved another big success in the mission to eliminate Naxalism under the Naxal Mukt Bharat Abhiyan. Shah reiterated that the Modi government's ruthless approach against Naxalism, asserting that a zero-tolerance policy is being followed for those who refuse to surrender despite rehabilitation opportunities. He further stated that the country is on track to become Naxal-free by 31st March next year. Astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore returned home after their 8-day mission to the International Space Station that turned into a 9-month-long stay. They flew on a Boeing Starliner to space on June 5 last year and returned in Space's Dragon spacecraft on March 19. Williams and Wilmore, both former Navy pilots, had flown to the orbital lab on June 5 last year on what was supposed to be an 8-day mission and the first crewed flight of a Boeing Starliner. They were left stranded after the Starliner capsule suffered propulsion issues. Deemed unfit to fly, it returned uncrewed in September. Amid uncertainty over their return journey, NASA reassigned them to Space's Crew 9 mission, and the Dragon spacecraft was sent in September with a 2-member crew instead of the usual 4 to make space for the stranded astronauts. After a series of delays, the Dragon spacecraft carrying a relief team docked at a space station. Well, that's it for this week's news recap. For more news, you keep watching Global Winter.